Hey, welcome everyone to our first pilot episode of RippleLIVE. I am here with Mark Spencer. We're super excited to bring the show to you in an interactive format. And I'm in my studio, and Mark is not in his studio right now. Why is that, Mark? Where are you actually?
Yeah, that's right, Steve. I'm actually at a Starbucks because we had a I gotta mute my audio for a minute here. Actually, I shouldn't do that. We had a big storm last night and it knocked out our power. So I am operating from a Starbucks right now, unfortunately, on our first live show, but we're rolling with the changes and we'll do as best we can here. In
Yes,
fact, I'll show you. You can see right here that my Nest is offline, which means we still have no power. It went out at 6 p.m. last night, and this morning as of 10 a.m. here, it's still not there. So Steve's going to have to kind of drive the show here. So you go for it, Steve.
All right. So, like I said, we're doing this live, and let me tell you a little bit about the show and kind of why we decided to do it. Mark and I had been doing MacBreak Studio for about 10 years, and I actually can't believe we've been doing MacBreak for 10 years. And it usually involved me flying up to the Bay Area or him flying down to Arizona and working in our studios, and we do the show together. Good, we did that for 10 years, but it got more challenging over the years just because of the flights and that we have fairly busy schedules. But we always wanted to do a live show. In fact, the first version of the live show we did, some of you may have seen, it was the Final Cut Pro virtual user group. So this is kind of the natural evolution of the virtual user group. So I'm now referring to this as kind of like AKA the virtual Toozer group, where it's just Mark and I. But the idea and the format behind the show is we do a tip, I do a tip, and then we answer your questions live, and then Mark will do a tip, and then we answer more questions. And of course, Mark's not in his studio, and he won't be doing his tips, so he'll just be doing mine. So bottom line is, it's just a tip show, and then we answer your questions. We'll do our best to answer your questions, and there's a lot of them that come in. One way to ensure that your questions do get answered, YouTube has this feature called Super Chat, and you'll notice in the chat window there's a little dollar button. If you click that, you can donate a nominal amount, $5, $10, whatever you want. And what that does is it helps support the show. And what it'll do is it'll pin your comment to the top of the feed. And the more you donate, the longer the comment will stay at the top. You don't have to do that, but we'd appreciate it to help us support the show. In terms of the show format, this is it'll be interesting because we'll be switching back and forth between the screenshot of me or Mark and our interface. If we have time, I do have a segment of the show where I do called Production Tech, where we show some of the gear we used or using. Like if we have some time today, I'd like to show you some of the hardware we're using to actually stream the show. I think you might be interested in that. Those of you who actually do live streams, you'll find it interesting. So I have a piece of hardware we'll show you towards the end of the show. With that, I think we'll just jump into my first tip, and then we'll start answering your questions. Sound great? All right, guys, let's switch to the UI. All right, so I am in Final Cut Pro 10 right now, and you can see I have a sequence and I have a title. And I'm always looking for ways to work faster. And well, before I start here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure I remove any effects. I didn't remove any. Okay, so a lot of times you want to do a fade on a title. Right now it just cuts on. I'm going to show you something. One fast way to add fades to a title is just select the title and hit Command T. And of course what that does is it adds transitions to the title and you get a fade in and fade out. And it's using the default transition length, okay? And by the way, I discovered a tip recently. I think it's kind of fun. If you want to do a live preview of your changes, you can press R to bring up the range tool. And I'm just going to create a range around that title. And I'm going to press the / key. Now, in order for this to work, you have to have looping turned on, which is Command L. Command L turns on looping. Now I'm going to tap the question mark key or / key. Now notice my playhead starts looping around that title. Now what's great is I can go in and make adjustments to this title. So I can go ahead and adjust the duration. Notice it's still looping as I'm making my changes on the text itself. It hasn't stopped. And you'll notice the range boundary is gone, but I can still preview this in real time. I find that to be really handy way of proving. It's almost like motion in a way. So you just create a range with looping on it, so it's looping back and forth. Okay, pretty cool, huh? I think that's probably one of my, we can stop with that tip right there, but I actually have a little bit more to show you. So I could delete both of these, and then if I select that and I select delete, now I have this very fat title. And the reason why it's so fat is because whenever you add transitions, it has to place the title in what's called a secondary storyline. It just has to, but it takes up a lot of screen real estate. One way to do this without having to delete all those transitions is if you go to the clip menu and choose break apart clip items, Shift Command G. If you do that, you'll get a dialog that says break apart. And if you just do that, what it does is it breaks apart the clip items and it removes the transitions all in one fell swoop. So it saves you a couple of clicks. All right, so I want to show you some things about keyframing. Notice my active clip indicator is over the title right now. And if I press Control V, I will get this. Little window. It's the animation editor, and the animation editor allows you to work with keyframes and work with different parameters right here on the clip itself. So I can transform the title, I can trim it, I can distort it, or I can choose opacity. Now, one thing that you might not know is that you don't have to see all of these parameters. In fact, if you're only working with opacity, you don't need to see all of these other parameters there. In fact, they're just taking up screen real estate. So if you take your mouse back up to the clip menu, there is a feature called Solo Animation, Control-Shift-V. By doing that, watch what happens. The animation editor now only shows you the parameter you're working with. In this case, opacity. It hides all the other ones, which is really fantastic. So when working with opacity and I want to add keyframes, I simply just double click and it opens and closes these. Now, in terms of fading, I'm going to show you a couple of things that you may not know. One is you could use these fade handles. There's these little dots. If you drag them, you can fade in and out. But the problem is if I double click and minimize this, they still fade in, but there's no way to adjust that fade handle when the animation editor is collapsed. So there's a better way to do this. So I'm going to open this up and I'm going to show you another way. I find using this bar, this is an opacity bar. This changes the opacity. I find it better to use keyframes, and here's why. So I'm going to set a few keyframes for this by using the Option key. So moving my mouse pointer over the bar, opacity bar, I'm going to set 2 keyframes right there at the beginning, and I'm going to bring this one down. So now you can see the title fades up. I'm going to Option click here and Option click here, bring this down. So now I'm fading the title up, holds, and then fades out. Now, here's what's great about keyframes as opposed to using those opacity handles I showed you just a moment ago. I'm going to go ahead and collapse the title clip. And what's great about this is that the keyframes are visible right there on the collapsed version of the animation, making it very easy for me to just if I want to change the rate of fade, to just grab a keyframe and just move it right here on the clip itself. And what's especially cool is I can move them all as a group, which is something you couldn't do with using the fade handles or using the transitions I showed you earlier. If you hold down the Shift key, you could select the first keyframe. It's selected, it's yellow. If I hold down the Shift key, I can select the last keyframe. And notice now all 4 of those keyframes are selected. Now, what's great is that with them selected, I can now move them as a group. So I can move the entire thing. Maybe I want the fades to start in earlier, maybe I want it to start in later. This is fast way of working, and I don't ever have to change the length of the clip. I don't have to trim the clip to change where I want those fades to come in. So at any point, if I want to change them, I just select the keyframe. And then if I do need to get back into those other parameters again, Control-Shift-V will reveal all the other parameters, Control-Shift-V. V will collapse them down. So here's something else. Let's say you want to work with transforms, or like it's a scaling. So if I select transform, notice it's selected at the top, these highlight, select that and hit Control Shift V. Notice now only transforms are showing. The thing about transforms, I can't set keyframes right here. I would have to go back into the video inspector, and I would then have to set transforms for scale. But I could do that. I could set keyframes, and notice as I set keyframes, I could do that. So that's my tip, and I want you to bring us back to the 2-up, Travis. Okay, so I don't know, Mark. Would you? Actually, I don't know if Mark's watching a delayed version of this.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, good.
I'm here.
So that's the first tip. All right. So I guess at this point, we have a chat at the top. Let's see here. There's one at the top here. Let me see that.
We think it's just a donation.
Okay. All right. So
Yeah,
let's see. All right. Yep. All right. So Sean, but hey, by the way, Sean Boachillin, thanks for the donation. Really appreciate it. Let's see if there's any questions. Let's go down here.
Hey, Steve. Steve,
Yeah.
can you hear me?
I can.
There's a question. There's a question from Bob that you might want to answer. He's asking about timelines. Like he wants to be able to hide the timeline or to be able to organize timelines like you could in Final Cut 7. And I thought you could just show him the timeline history.
All right. Right.
Thing.
So Bob,
It's
if you're
Bob Franco.
okay, hey Bob, how's it going? So Final Cut Pro allows you to only see one timeline at a time. So hopefully you're on the UI guys. There's only one timeline at a time, and I that's just the way it works. But there is a button for timeline history. Like I worked on a timeline earlier before I went on the show. If I click this button here, it says go forward in timeline history. There's another timeline I was working on. You can have a number of timelines open, and then if you click these buttons, you can essentially get to them. And by the way, if you right click on these buttons here, I only have 2 timelines open, but if let's say I had like 7 timelines open, if I right click on the history button, it'll show you a list of all your timelines that you can then just jump to. So it's not quite hiding, but you can access them via that little drop-down menu. So hopefully that answered your question. All right. All right, let's see if there's another question. Mark, there?
Yeah, so if you go right to the bottom, Carol is asking, can you make a fast key for a self-made workspace?
A self-made workspace. That's a good question. So
like, can you set up a custom workspace and then create a keyboard shortcut to jump to that custom workspace?
I don't believe so. I'm pretty sure that they're relegated to the ones that are built in, but like for example, I can adjust the screen here, and if I go up to workspaces, I could save that workspace. But by the way, there's a workspace I created earlier called Steve, and while these are previous ones here, it looks like I've saved. I'm gonna just I'm gonna jump to that to see what that does. Oh, okay, so there's a multicam workspace I created. So if you go into the command editor and go into customize, where you would think it would be is if I typed in workspace, you'll notice that it has the built-in workspaces and that custom one isn't there. But looks like you can't do it. I've tried this before. Maybe someone out there has found a way to do it. I don't think it's possible. Otherwise it would appear here. So I say no. I'm going to go back to workspace. I'm going to set this back to the default here. Okay. Excellent. All right. So, okay. So I have a question. Jerry King, thank you for that donation. Have you heard if future Final Cut Pro 10 will offer a simple way to output LUFS audio for broadcast? Okay. So I should just clarify that Mark and I don't work for Apple. We work closely for Apple, and they don't actually tell us what they're going to do. And audio is a big, it's a feature that a lot of people have the most requests for. They go across the board. Everything from, hey, can you please give us a roll-based mixer to, can you please give us a really nice cross dissolve? Look, they're there. So in terms of the Luft's meter, we've talked about meters that right now Final Cut meters are what are called peak meters. We'd like a meter that's more of an average or an average of the dialogue or the volume coming out. So the meters are somewhat limited. So here's what I would suggest, Jerry, is that Apple does read their feedback. And if I could just point this out for everybody. And so if I could just point this out for everyone, I'm going to go over to the Final Cut Pro menu. Switch to my interface, please. I'm going to go over here to, there's a menu in Final Cut called Provide Final Cut Pro Feedback. All right. And I want to bring you to this page here because people don't realize you could send, Mark, you might want to mute your audio for a moment because I hear babies crying and whatnot. Okay, so here is a list where you can put in your name, email address. You can tell Apple what feature request or maybe a bug request, or maybe that you're experiencing some sort of bug. I can tell you that Apple does read all of these. They read every one of these comments, and it's not like the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark where your comments go into a wooden box into a huge warehouse, next to other wooden boxes that have thousands of other feature requests. They look at these, they aggregate them, and then they prioritize them. So what I'm saying is, tell them what you want, and if they get enough of those requests, you'll see those features in a future release. I have no idea when they might be implemented, but all I can say is they are reading the feedback from that page. All right, excellent. Yep. Yeah. Be nice. Always be helpful. It's great. Okay, so
one note.
Yes.
Steve's feed or Mark's feed's broken because we lost Skype.
All right, so we lost Mark on the Skype feed from Starbucks. That's the nature of doing this stuff live and different places. So hopefully he'll join us, or maybe not. But he's certainly in the chat window, and he's certainly there answering questions. So let's see. Okay. Let's see here. We got some questions. Okay, so there is a question from Edgar. I'm just looking at Edgar Davis. Thank you for your question. Is there any current way to translate Motion 5 to After Effects and back? I'm going to answer that question. I actually can deal with that. Well, Motion and After Effects, completely different architectures. There is no way to, let's say, I'm going to take my Motion project and open it in After Effects. About the best you could do is, open layers in After Effects. You can send your Final Cut Pro timeline. Man, it's been a while since I've used it, like using automatic duck. And this goes way back. But the short answer is, if you did something in Motion that required, like you have animation, you've got camera moving, you got something fairly complex, that's not going to transfer to After Effects. It's just not. But the most you can do is send the layers over to After Effects and then start from scratch. Or you can render out your Motion movie as a ProRes and then bring it into After Effects. But that's not exactly workflow integration. That's just bringing in a flattened movie. So answer is, unfortunately, no. All right. So here's another question here from Greg. Hey, Greg, thanks a lot for the Super Chat donation. Can you discuss the best way for collaborative editing for editors geographically challenged? Separated. Yes, I would love to discuss that with you. All right. I'm going to jump back into Final Cut so you can switch back over to Final Cut for me, guys. And I am going to talk a little bit about Jira. This is actually right up our alley because, as I mentioned at the start of the show, Mark's in San Francisco, I'm in Arizona, and we often have to work on the same project. So one of the things you could do, and I'm going to give a plug here for Frame.io. I always say Frame.io. It's actually Frame.io. I'm going to give a plug for Frame.io in that one thing you could do is, if you're working remotely, you can share all your clips using Frame.io and you can download it to the full res. Or if you don't want to do all this upload and downloading, just create your library. Here I'm in Final Cut, and you just create your library. See, I have this library here. I'm going to open it up, and I have all these clips. So the idea would be, is create a managed library, not an external one. What I mean, of course, by a managed library is that the library itself is, all the media is in the library, okay? So you can see that this particular event I'm showing you is all the media is in the library. So then you would you would literally take that library and transfer it to a drive, and you would ship it over to whoever you're collaborating with. And then they would have the same media that you had. And then what you could do then is you can then share XMLs. For example, if I like this project, I could share the XML and I text it or not text it, but email it. So I can export that project file as XML. And then since my collaborator that's working remotely has the same media, it should just hook right up, and you should have all the project online that all the media online from that particular project. I should point out that there is a difference. There's one drawback to working with XML. You're going to cut to the two up of me for a minute. There is one drawback to working with XML. XML is primarily designed for, think about it as almost like a cut list. So like, all your clips, transitions, a couple of titles. If you do things like share complex things, like you have like audio filters or something, like a lot of complex filtering and whatnot, I would recommend that you not share XML, but then you might want to share just the project file. So that's something that you might consider. But back to your question, the remote sharing is just really just making sure both of you have the same media on the same drive, and then you could just share XMLs. That's the simplest way to do it. So hopefully that answered your question. If not, feel free to, by the way, you can always contact us directly through our support at rippletraining.com, and we compile a list of, we prioritize them, and we can always try to answer your question that way if you don't get the full question answered that you want here. All right, excellent. So some new questions. All right. Let's see here. So Bill Aston is asking, I know you're all devotees of Frame.io, yet they're aware of Whipster and their offerings, similarities. Unfortunately, Bill, I don't use Whipster, so I can't really compare the difference. Here's what I would tell you. Does Whipster have direct Final Cut Pro 10 integration where I could like skim in Frame.io and skim? If they don't, I would say that's the biggest right there. I think it's huge to be able to have a direct link between Frame.io and the project I'm working on vis-a-vis markers in the timeline. So I would say I'll probably stick with Frame.io for a while, and I can't imagine Whipster having that feature. So off the top of my head, that would be the main difference for me. Okay, so by the way, Malcolm, thanks for your shout out on our Mark's Media Management tool. In fact, I would recommend our Mark's Media Management tutorial on everything relative to sharing media, collaborating with other users. It really is a must-have. I'll put the link down in the comments section a little bit later. All right, so, all right, any questions here? Alex Predit, I tried a donation. YouTube charged my credit. I don't see my donation. So Alexi, just post your question here, and if I see it, I'll answer it. So really, I'm not sure why that is, but I want to make sure you get your question answered. Okay. All right. So a lot of people seem to really like Whipster. Kripa, I hope I'm pronouncing that properly. He said, thank you to Mark. Well, thank you for watching us. So Pablo Rojas, is there a way to work with Maya files on cameras like After Effects with motion? Man, that's definitely a question for Mark, because really it's about bringing in camera data directly into motion. Mark, hopefully if you see that, maybe you can answer that in the comments. So I'm not as up on the whole camera, virtual camera tracking stuff that these 3D apps offer. So hopefully Mark can answer that for you. Awesome. What is the easiest, most efficient way to just archive the used elements as a project for master backup? All right. so, um, so let's see. Moving objects. Okay, what's the best way? Okay, I should talk about what Final Cut can and can't do. Those Final Cut Pro. Let's say you have 20 gigabytes of media in your library, and you're using a project that's maybe only using 2 gigabytes. Well, you don't want all of that library media to be archived. So let me show you a quick way to archive in Final Cut Pro 10. And I actually have a map break on this subject, but here's the short answer. I'm in this library here, and I'm gonna just open up this. Let me find something. I guess. Oh wait, you know what? I'll use this one. This one has got. Okay, this is a timeline where it's a short film that we shot here, and it was shot on the Red, and then it was transcoded to ProRes, and I could just tell you this had like, I don't know, 50 gigabytes of content we shot. Maybe it was 100, I don't know. But the easiest way to archive something is just archive the projects. I'm not interested in archiving every single clip, just the clips used in the project. So if I select the project, you can do this, which I recommend. You could say, copy project to library, new library. And then you create a new library. I'm going to call this is my short film archive. And I'm going to just save that. I'm going to save that on the desk. I know normally wouldn't recommend that. I'm going to just save that on my desktop. And I click save. And what's going to ask me, do you want it to include optimized media, proxy media, whatnot? I'm going to go ahead and click. If I go ahead and click OK, which I'm not going to do because this is on my that laptop, and that I could run out of disk space. So not going to do that. But here's what's going to happen. It's going to just take that project and move just the media for that project into that library and ignore everything else in the library. So then you'll get a smaller footprint. What Final Cut Pro doesn't do is it doesn't trim the media for you. So if you have a clip in the timeline that's 10 seconds, but it came from a 10-minute clip, that entire 10-minute clip gets archived. It's just the way it works. If you want to trim it, there is a third-party piece of software that allow you to trim the media the way the old Final Cut Pro 7 used to do it, was using the media manager. It's called Works for X. Works for X. It's an app on the App Store. So, by the way, speaking of apps on the App Store, look, can I show this I should show this to you really quick. I'm going to go over to I'm going to go to Apple's, let's see, hopefully here. If you go to, you might want to bring up that resource text, guys. If you go to apple.com Final Cut Pro resources, this is a really great page Apple has created for all kinds of really useful third-party plugins. Everything from tutorials to plugins, it's all right here. So I should point this out. See, anyway, just wanted to point that out. But if you go back to the cameras for a sec, Works for X, I'll put the link in there, and that'll allow you to do trimmed media, essentially. All right. So Carol, I hope I pronounced that right. Put the accent on the right part of your name. Thank you so much for that comment. All right. Let's see if somebody's. Let's see here. Any questions? Okay. It looks like Ellen. Hi, Ellen. Ellen Bittner. Can I share my Final Cut Pro library via Dropbox instead of physical hard drive? I've heard it's unsafe. Okay. Very easy to answer. Don't use Dropbox. Okay. The reason is, if you got to think of a Final Cut Pro library, it's really a folder with all this content inside, but really the Final Cut Pro library is really a database, and that database needs to be updated constantly. Dropbox is not a good place to collaborate just because of the nature of how it works. It doesn't play well with library files, which are essentially closed folders with all of this changing data that's happening on the inside. So definitely no on that. Don't use Dropbox. All right. All right, so let's see here. What do you use for your second streaming monitor? Ooh, good question. Okay, so we're running our live stream off of an iMac Pro, and I also have a Mac Thunderbolt display. And my guys, they connected a Thunderbolt cable between the iMac Pro and the Thunderbolt display, and they're using what's called a Thunderbolt bridge. We can be set up. So we use Thunderbolt bridge, and so now I'm really fast connection, and you could do screen sharing. So I'm screen sharing my iMac Pro on my Thunderbolt display, and I see pretty much, I can see the chat window, everything here. So it's great. So speaking of streaming, this might be a good point to talk about some of the hardware that we're working. Okay, so let me show you if you guys are interested. I know some of you like to stream. I'm going to show you some of this hardware. I'm going to jump over to Keynote, and this would be the production tech here. Check this out. So how are we actually doing this? We're using professional cameras. We're not using cheap webcams like you get off the shelf USB webcam. So how are we doing this? Okay, we're using this box called the Blackmagic Design Web Presenter. And I'll get to the price of it in a moment. But you buy it from Blackmagic, you buy it from Amazon or B&H. It looks just like this on the front. But on the back, it looks like this. And it has two inputs. It has an SDI input and it has an HDMI input. Okay, so two inputs. Then what we do is Mark and I, these are the cameras I use. I use a Canon C100 and Mark uses a Lumix Panasonic GH5. Both of those cameras have HDMI output. So on Mark has one of these boxes. I have one of these boxes. He Skypes in, and we're using, by the way, Open Broadcaster. So we're using OBS, and so he Skypes into OBS, and his Blackmagic box is sending the feed to Skype, and we're getting an OBS over HDMI. We're not using the SDI at all, and I'll tell you why in a moment. Okay. Or why you might, I should tell you why you might want to use the SDI in a moment. Okay, so the big difference here is we could use professional cameras instead of those lame USB cameras. Now, some of them that look, to be sure, they're getting better, but I just like to have the control of a professional camera. Here's the key to this box. This is it. Notice that it has a USB webcam. So you plug a USB cable from the back of this box into your Macintosh, and it sends the video and audio from these professional cameras over USB 2, not even USB 3. It's 60 megabytes per second. So really what happens when you use any app like Skype or Live, well, any app that uses webcam, it basically, this box tricks those devices into making your professional camera appear as a webcam. That's it. So you get a really good quality stream at a very, very low data rate. I can't recommend this box enough. One downside is it outputs a 720p stream. It doesn't do 1080, but okay, well, I mean, go ahead and cut to my feed for a second. Maybe do the single. You can cut to the single if you have it.
Yep. Okay,
so what you're looking at is the feed right out of my C100 right to there. So you can see we're lighting it, by the way. I have an LCD light here, and I've got some fill light, but essentially what you're looking at is the output of that box at 720p, okay? So if you can go back, switch back to the UI for a second. All right, so back to the UI, I'm coming out USB. I'm gonna show you one other thing. Okay, so why would you use the SDI? Okay, well, in some cases, what if you have two cameras that you want to do a multicam switch? You want to do multicam. Well, those two cameras, the Canon and the Lumix, the GH5, both have HDMI. They don't have SDI. So you can get this little box called an HDMI to SDI, and you can run the HDMI into the box, come out SDI, and go into the SDI in, and then you would have two inputs. So I could literally switch between one camera and the other. So that begs the question, how would I switch? I'm glad you asked. Next slide. Okay, Blackmagic sells this optional little smart panel. It's $85, and it connects to the front of it. And notice it has an LCD screen, but notice there are two buttons on the front, a 1 and a 2. So the 2 that's illuminated is the HDMI feed. If you had an SDI signal going into the other feed, you would just press 1. So you could literally use this box as a switch box between two cameras. It works fantastic. So I can switch seamlessly between one camera and the other, and then feed those cameras into whatever streaming encoder that you're using, and you're good to go. Let's see here. So there it is, the web presenter. It's a little pricey, but it's, in terms of what we're doing, it I don't know, it allows you to use pro cameras instead of off the shelf ones. Okay, so you want to bring me back to the single if you want, Travis? Okay, so we got some questions here I want to go back to. All right, so I'm Robert Travis Pierce. Thanks for this. What are your real world distinctions and use cases for managing projects with duplicate project versus duplicate project as Snapshot? Okay, very good question. So let me go back to Final Cut. So what Robert is asking essentially is, if you have a project, I'm going to select that there, you have two options, duplicate project and duplicate project as Snapshot. What is the difference? Okay. In a nutshell, because it would take me a little bit of time to set this up, but here's the basic difference. If you're using projects that contain, and go to a single camera for a moment. If you're using projects that contain multicam clips or compound clips, you want to use duplicate project as Snapshot. Here's what happens when you use duplicate project. When you use duplicate project, and I have multicam projects or compound clips in it, let's say I have two projects, and I make a change to a multicam project in this one. Well, that change on the duplicate will happen in this project. So basically what happens is whatever change on this project happens in this one if you do a duplicate project. Well, in most cases you want that. It's like, okay, I make a change to the multicam clip. I want it to make a change to my duplicate. But sometimes you don't want that. Sometimes you want the project frozen in that state. In other words, I have a multicam project and I want it to stay in that original state, but also make changes on the one I'm working with. That's where duplicate project as Snapshot comes in. Well, if you duplicate project as Snapshot, it does what the name implies. Takes a snapshot of that project with its multicam clips and compound clips in its current state and allows you to make changes to the duplicate without affecting the original project. That's the difference. So all that to say, if you don't have multicam clips or compound clips in your timeline, then you could just use duplicate projects. You're good. But if you have multicam clips or compound clips, you really want to do Snapshot. There's actually some other reasons why you might use snapshots. I know Mark really likes using them. He's working really fast. Do a snapshot, and it's just quick snapshot of what you're working on. You keep working on the project, do a snapshot, keep working, do a snap, and notice the keyboard shortcut Shift Command D. We're big fans of that. You're working Shift Command D. You're working Shift Command D. Working Shift Command D. It's that Final Cut Pro autosaves. It's our version of actually saving what we're doing and freezing that project in its current state. So I know it was kind of a long-winded explanation. Hopefully that made sense to you. All right, awesome. Thanks for that question. All right, so Marcelo. Okay, thank you. Thank you for the donation, Marcelo. Really appreciate. Best archival practices for finished projects, local and remote. I create small tutorials for Portuguese-speaking students, nothing too big. Well, at the risk of, I just earlier in the stream went over that, which is basically you create a library and you save the I just did this. You create a library and you select the library and you go up to the file menu and you choose copy project to library, new library. You create the library and click save. And what happens is Final Cut Pro will then take just the contents of the library and move it into that library, and there's your archive. Okay, I did a little bit more of an explanation earlier. I'll go back on the stream after we post the show and you can see it, but that's essentially it. You take the project and you save it to another library, and it only saves that project with that media. Awesome. Okay, Robert Dale Klein. All right, thanks for the donation, Rob. Really appreciate it. And Peter. Thanks for the donation. Really appreciate. And I will have a beer on you, actually, although it's a little early here in Arizona to have a beer. But yeah. I'm not a big fan of IPA beers. So Mark is like, He's IPA king. He'll just drink anything that's been fermented. Anyway, so where did you get the template used to create the very cool water droplet title at the beginning of your live show today? All right, good question. I'm always looking for templates for music, and I get this question all the time. I use a number of different sources. One of them, of course, is Pond 5, and that's a big one. But I like to find the lesser known little places to find these kinds of things. I use Envato, E-N-V-A-T-O, Envato. And Envato is it basically they have stock footage, stock video, but they also have a bunch of After Effects templates. So I was looking for an After Effects template, and I was just searching through our library, and I found this splash, and it's After Effects, not Motion. I'm actually a big fan of After Effects, and I found that template that included the background with the splash. I found it for like $10 on Envato, and I downloaded it, and I just I altered it, and that's all I did. I just changed the logo, because a lot of these templates you just swap out your own stuff, and there you have it. But that's all I did is swap out the logo, and I'm glad you liked it, because I thought it was pretty cool too. So check out Envato, and I found a lot of music there. In fact, it would be called Envato. It's called audiojungle.net if you're looking for a piece of music. In fact, the music that we were playing under that splash was actually also an Envato property. So audiojungle.net, check that out. All right, thanks for that question. Let's see. Very good. Awesome. This is it's a lot of fun. Okay. Sean, yes, the video will be posted later. All right, let's see. Okay, Christian is up. Christian Frank isn't happy that there's no audio ducking in Final Cut Pro. Yeah, I was mentioning earlier that there are some audio things that people really want to see in Final Cut. All I would encourage you to do is submit a feedback form, which I showed you in the Final Cut Pro menu, and Apple reads those. Yeah, I know iMovie has a pretty awesome audio ducking, but I don't know, personally, I like to be able to do the audio ducking myself rather than letting the software do it, but that's just me. Okay. Okay. All right. So let's see. Okay. So there's a question that, by the way, forgive me if there's so many, I'm getting a lot of questions. So if I miss your question, just post it again and I'll do my best to see it. That's all I can tell you, because I'm looking at a stream of text here. So B. Stoddard is asking, does Final Cut Pro 10 have a way to see stabilize effects in the index after round tripping to resolve? After round trip effects are null. Okay, simple question. In the timeline there, there's no way to see that. Okay, because the reason is Resolve, what it does when you send your project from Resolve over to Final Cut, everything's flattened at that point, because Resolve has to render out every single clip in the timeline and before it sends the XML. So when you open the XML in Final Cut, you're really just pointing to the rendered media files from Resolve. So unfortunately there's no way to do it. Look, I know that the XML is getting better, but there's only so much you can do. And I mentioned earlier that XML, you got to think of XML as really kind of the modern version of the old EDLs, which is, it stands for Edit Decision List, which is just, your clips, how long they are, where they appear in time. They're just more sophisticated EDLs, really. Just think of them that way. Okay. Okay. Oh, Big Water. Thank you for the donation. Wow. Thank you, my friend. Okay. Yeah. And then Joel Gardner makes a good point. If you do want to duck the audio, in fact, Joel, thank you for bringing that up. If you can, we can jump back over to Final Cut for a second, guys. Really good point about the ducking of the audio. So what I'm going to do is, let's say if you want to duck, I'm going to make this a little bit bigger here. I'm going to make there we go. Okay, so you can use the range tool. So I'm going to just press R, and I'm going to drag across like there, and then you can then drag down here, and then you can duck the audio within the range. It's a manual process, but there is that manual ducking, which is nice. By the way, you don't even have to use the mouse, which is really cool. So if I bring out a range you can use the audio. Let's see, adjust volume. Notice adjust volume up or down is control plus and minus. So notice this. I'm not even using the mouse. I just created a range, and if I want control minus, notice all I'm doing is hitting control plus. It's only adjusting the audio within the range. It's not adjusting the audio outside the range. So that's not exactly automatic ducking, but it's the next best thing. So thank you. All right, awesome. All right, so let's see what's next. All right, good. So we showed you that. So Carol is asking, how about the new Apple legacy media, no longer supported media within FCP issues with the next Mac OS? Look, here's my feeling on that. Apple produced a white paper just around the holidays, and they clarified their position, and they listed all of the codecs that are going to be deprecated. And I have to tell you, that list of codecs are codecs that I haven't used for a long time anyway. I really don't think, I think people, this is one of those things where I think people are getting all worked up over nothing. I think Apple's pretty aware. I mean, certainly, they don't want people not being able to open their media files that they shot with their Canon cameras or their Sony cameras. That's not going to happen. It's really about the 30. It's really about the older, 32 bit. Is 32 bit? I think it's 32 bit. Right?
4.
Well, no, the older codecs. Anyway, it's 32 bits. It's really because they're moving. The next OS will be all 64 bit, and look, QuickTime is going away. It's all being handled under the hood via vis-a-vis frameworks, and it's going to make a better user experience. But these old codecs, and I laugh. It's like, I can't open my Sorensen codec. Dude, really? Sorensen codec? I mean, when was the last time we needed to use? Anyway, you don't have to worry about it. I really don't think it's much to do over nothing. Okay. Thanks to Powered. Thanks for that donation. Super thanks for that. Okay. All right. See here. Oh, Phil, Steve, strong work under unforeseen stressful conditions. Thanks. It is a little stressful doing these live streams at first. All this stuff can go wrong. Mark's literally, his power went out, and he's in Starbucks. In fact, his stream just died right in the middle. I mean, he's using Wi-Fi over Starbucks, and he's competing with somebody using Roblox, drinking 17 Starbucks Frappuccinos. So, it happens. So anyway, thanks for that. All right. Oh, wow, Jerry, thank you. Wow. Really appreciate that. That's really nice of you. Wow, you guys, this is great, man. This is like really fantastic. Oh, while I'm talking about it, I was thinking about this. Since you guys we want to make this a regular deal. Maybe you could post comments. The comments after the show. We would love to get your feedback on what things you would like to see in the future, and it pretty much could be anything. Right now, we're focused on Final Cut, but I know some of you use Resolve. Some of you use. Well, I'll tell you right now, we're not going to do Premiere. We're just not. We're pretty dyed-in-the-wool Final Cut. We also love Resolve. If you want to, we could possibly do a Resolve-based one in the future. It's up to you, or if you have some specific thing that you want us to cover, just put it in the comments, and we could start compiling those, and then we can do shows around a specific subject. But we really want to make this kind of a community deal like this, where you get your questions answered and make it relevant for you. Okay, Jeff, thanks for that. Thank you. Thanks for that donation. We really appreciate it. Okay. Okay. Yeah, Plan 9 Films, when I did the audio, you're right. If I come back to the interface for a second, he said it did a hard edit, and I have to agree. And what it does is it ducks it. It didn't used to do this, but notice it ducks it at a one-frame duck. One frame duck. Okay, but bottom line duck is that you are, unfortunately, then you might want to then have to pull out these keyframes to smooth them out. So yeah, you know what? It didn't used to work that way. It used to actually make nice fades within the range. I don't know why it does that. It's just like, boop. So yeah, all right, whatever. You didn't used to work that way. Okay. Yeah, I like that. We're not doing Premiere. Okay. So here's Robert. Which eGPU box card combo would you recommend? I use the LG Thunderbolt 3 monitor. Is it worth getting eGPU that's not TB Thunderbolt 3 from the card? Honestly, Robert, I haven't actually tried. We're going to be getting an eGPU box shortly, and we're going to be testing that. So I'm a little, I don't have enough information to tell you which one to use yet, but I'm very curious about them. I see them really beneficial, taking a lot of the resource, the processing off the processor. We'll see. I'll let you know. That's definitely a subject for the future. When we get one, I'd love to do something on that. Okay. So Dieter, I don't know. Right now we're planning on doing once a week until, I don't know. Right now, we're going to try to do these regular so we can, that's what I'm saying right now. Is there a way to set shortcuts for panning audio? Piper. Thanks, Bob. Thanks, Bob Searle. Really appreciate that. Is there a way to set shortcuts for panning audio left and right? No, there isn't. And I had to think about, no, there's no shortcuts that I'm aware. I mean, one quick way again is to go into the command editor and you could tell. You just go to the command editor, type in pan, and look at that. Okay. I love this. I love the show. So it says pan left. Oh wait, that's for a 360 viewer. Pan left, 360. Okay. So just for everyone's basic knowledge, like if you're wondering about a keyboard shortcut, it's really easy to find out. Just open the command editor and type in the command you think should be there. And if it's not there, they don't support it. Okay. So, which is one of the reasons why a lot of people are asking for a role-based mixer. Apple can you please give us a mixer? I don't know if you guys tell me in the comments. Is that something you want to see? Do you want to see a role-based mixer like Premiere and Resolve where you have like inputs and sliders and faders, and because then there's a reason to have a control surface where then you actually, because then really panning would be a tactile knob on a mixer, right? Because honestly, let's say you could do it. The keyboard, yeah, it's great, but having it go through a physical control surface would be better ultimately. I'm just curious if that's something you think is important. I'd love, put it in the comments. And not obviously, I can tell you for certain Apple watches this show, and they'll be very curious about what you think about that particular feature. All right. Can I tell you something? This little aside, little joke here. We did a Final Cut Pro summit back up in May, and we had like 130 Final Cut Pro users from all over the world come in Cupertino, and everybody there, one feature that they really wanted was this thing called dupe detection. You know what dupe detection is? It's a little flag in the timeline that shows you that you actually used the clip. So it prevents you from using the same section of clip somewhere else in your timeline. Everybody wanted dupe detection. Why don't we have it? Final Cut 7 have it. Premiere has it. Resolve has it. Why doesn't Final Cut? So we made a video where everybody at the convention took their phones and said, Apple, we want dupe detection. Please give us dupe detection. And we sent it off to them. So you know what? If you see dupe detection in the next version, well, you'll know why. So anyway. All right. So a couple questions here. Is there a way to remove wind noise in FCP without affecting dialogue? No. The nature of noise, and actually there's no such thing as noise removal, it's noise reduction. I don't know if you said anyway, the thing is that when you're, let me see if I can find something with dialogue in it here. Maybe let's see here if I have. There are some good features in Final Cut for reducing dialogue, and for some reason I'm not having. Okay, I do have some dialogue here. I'm going to select this dialogue track here. It's a clip, not a track. And not people don't know this, but under audio enhancements, you have this thing called hide show right here. I'm gonna Actually, I'm going to expand the inspector, and notice here I have these things called audio enhance. It says equalization, loudness, noise removal, and hum removal. This checkbox, noise removal, is pretty good at isolating some of the, especially low-end rumble frequencies. You should try this first. I found it does a pretty decent job. But like any processed effect, if you go too far with it, your dialogue starts sounding like people are underwater, and I'm sure you're like that. I had to do my own version of that sound effect. Look, like anything, you listen to it and you push it as far as you can without the audio being affected too bad, and then you leave it alone. That works very well, but then you can also use a channel EQ, which is something you could use in addition or maybe in place of the noise removal filter. Okay. All right. Mr. Rod O. Smith. I like that. Rod O. Smith. Thank you. No, thank you for the donation. I really appreciate it. Awesome. Glad you're here. Thank you so much. Thank you, Plan 9 Films. Thank you so much. All right. So I'm looking for any other questions here. I have no idea what time it is. I'm having a lot of fun here. It's like, oh, wow. So what I'm going to do is I'll go for a couple more minutes. And I generally speaking, what I'd like to do is try to keep the show an hour. I mean, I could easily, or I could sit here all day. But my goal would be to do like an hour of this every week. And that way we can show you the best tips, answer your questions, and the show won't get boring after 2 hours. Like, okay, I actually got to go do other things like work or play with my kids or whatever. So thanks. Anyway, yeah. So what I want to do is see if there's any last questions. And all right, Piper Picks TV, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you that we can help you make your show better. All right, so Dieter's asking what makes 50 hertz to 60 hertz. Well, that has to do with where you're, the country of origin, where it's the cycle frequency of whatever the electricity you're using. I think that's what we're talking about. 50.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So 50 overseas and then 60 here. We're at a multiple of 30. 60 frames, 30 frames here, 29.97, 30. So we want to use. So if you have hum, you want to use 30. And if you're getting that hum overseas, then you want to. He's like, yes. I don't know. That was public. Google it. No, sorry. No. Anyway, okay. Looking at questions. So, okay. So this will be what I'm going to do is I'm going to answer one more question, and I'll answer. Let's see, Greg's Palmer's question here. And all Christians too. So this short, Greg, I always have to relink Final Cut Pro libraries after moving a library between computers. Is a way to make FC Pinks relevant. I'm assuming you're moving the library using a removable hard drive. Here's one trick: is if you name the removable hard drive the exact same name as the hard drive that your original library is on, because it's a path thing. When you plug that external library, that drive into the computer with that name drive, it should link up automatically. Should, okay? But I know relinking can be a pain, but it's not that hard. You just relink but yeah, try that. Try renaming the hard drive that your removable library is on to the same name as the hard drive that the originating library is on. See if that helps. Okay. All right. So, yeah, in Europe it's 50 hertz. Thanks, Dieter. You're right. Christian is asking, are there any upcoming courses? And the answer is yes. Mark is working, and I don't know if you know, Mark has been spending a lot of time in DaVinci Resolve lately. One thing I thought of is like a lot of you asking why use Resolve's color grading tools versus Final Cuts. There's some definite reasons for maybe we should do a section on that sometime. Here's why you might want to consider Resolve to do color grading. Speaking of Resolve, Mark is actually working on a Fusion tutorial, because Fusion is like this nodal-based, compositing and effects and motion graphics app that's built right into Resolve, that has tracking, and it's got It's got keys. It's pretty complex. So he's working on a tutorial that's specifically focused on how to do motion graphics effects. We're working on a couple of creative tutorials. I have a guy named Lee Herbert from Australia, and he's working on like how to tell better stories, which is not so technical, but really how to use the tool to tell stories. And also, I want to get your feedback on this. Please tell me thumbs up, thumbs down. I'd love to hear this. We're working on an extension app. Now, you've seen our extension app. You might have downloaded it from the App Store, which is basically, if you go ahead and click up to my interface for a moment, the extension app is a third-party plugin. So, like, if I select this, this is a tutorial that appears right inside the Final Cut Pro interface. So this is our basic tutorial, and what I'm building right now, what we're building is an extension app that explains how to use all of the audio plugins. It's really about, like, here's the 10 most common audio effects that you'd want to use in Final Cut: compressors, limiters, noise gates, those kinds of things. And we're building it into an extension app so that it's like this online help. It'll be right there available to you. So if you like that idea, we haven't finished it, but we're working on it. And that's something we hopefully will get out in the next few weeks. And that's what we're working on. Okay, Guy, thank you so much. Thank you, guys. All right, so I want to cut back to the single screen there. Mm-hmm. All right, so I think we're going to end the show. It's 12:01. Please leave your comments below, like things, future episodes. And there was probably a couple of other things I was supposed to cover for the end. Let's see here. Our next live show. We're going to try to do the same time next Thursday. We'll try to do this regular so you can get used to it. We tried to pick a time that's friendly to other time zones. It's always challenging. And thank you, everybody who donated. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And we really appreciate all you guys. If you have questions about anything technical that we didn't get to, you can always use support@rippletraining.com. And don't forget to subscribe. And again, on the behalf of Mark, Spencer, and myself, we couldn't do this without you. We really appreciate all of your input. So, signing off, Steve Martin here from Arizona. We'll see you next week on Matt Break Live. Thank you.